You think explaining yourself makes you more respectable. You think if people just understood your intentions, they would treat you differently. But look at your life carefully. Every time you try to explain who you are, you become less of it. Every time you defend your choices, you sound less certain about them. Every time you try to be understood, something about you feels weaker, quieter, smaller, and deep down, you've noticed it. You've walked away from conversations feeling like you gave too much and gained nothing, like you exposed something that should have stayed yours. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. If explaining yourself really made people respect you, why do you feel the least respected right after you do it? There was a man who refused to see human behavior through illusion. Niccolò Machiavelli observed people not as they wished to be, but as they truly were. He lived in a world of shifting power, unstable alliances, silent betrayals. And in that world, one thing became clear. People do not respond to truth. They respond to what feels stable, to what feels self-contained. And that principle has not disappeared, it has only become quieter. You are not in a royal court, but you are still surrounded by invisible hierarchies. In conversations, in friendships, at work, even in moments that seem casual, harmless, insignificant. People are constantly reading you, not your words, you, your tone, your hesitation, your need. Because need is always visible, even when you try to hide it behind logic. And this is where the ancient idea becomes personal, because every time you explain yourself too much, you reveal something you didn't intend to reveal, not your intelligence, not your clarity, but your dependence on being accepted. And once that is felt, everything changes. There is a pattern inside you. You don't notice it at first. It feels natural, even reasonable, but it follows you everywhere. You feel misunderstood, so you explain. Someone questions your decision, so you justify it. Someone reacts with confusion, so you add more context. You speak longer, you go deeper, you try to close every gap in understanding. And in your mind, you are doing the right thing. You are being clear, you are being open, you are being fair. But something strange keeps happening. The more you speak, the less control you feel. The more you explain, the less certain you sound. And the person in front of you does not relax. They lean back, they observe, they question more. Sometimes they interrupt, sometimes they lose interest, and sometimes they quietly lose respect. This is not random. This is a psychological pattern, a precise one. It is the compulsive need to stabilize perception through explanation. You feel a shift in how someone sees you, a subtle tension, a moment where you are no longer fully understood. And instead of tolerating that space, you rush to fill it, because that space feels dangerous, uncertain, uncontrolled. So you react, not with silence, but with words. More words, better words, clearer words. And this is where most people misunderstand themselves. You are not explaining to communicate. You are explaining to reduce discomfort. Your discomfort, the discomfort of being seen incorrectly, or worse, not being seen at all. And that discomfort triggers something deeper, a quiet fear. If they misunderstand me, I lose something. If they misjudge me, I lose control. If they don't see my value, maybe it's not there. So you try to secure it, externally, through explanation, through justification, through constant correction. And without realizing it, you enter a loop. The less secure you feel, the more you explain. The more you explain, the less secure you appear. And the more that perception becomes real, because people respond to what they feel, not what you say. And what they feel is hesitation, dependence, instability, even if your words are perfect. And this creates the exact outcome you were trying to avoid. You feel overlooked, ignored, undervalued, and you try to fix it the same way you always have, by explaining more. But here is the question you have not asked yourself. What if the problem is not what you say, but the fact that you feel the need to say it? The deeper truth is uncomfortable, because it has nothing to do with communication and everything to do with power. Not power in the dramatic sense, but power in its most subtle form. The power of perception. Machiavelli understood something most people avoid. Human beings do not carefully analyze others. They do not weigh every word, every intention, every detail. They form impressions, fast, instinctive, emotional, and those impressions are not based on how much you explain. They are based on how stable you appear, how self-contained you feel, how little you seem to need from the moment. And this is where the contradiction appears. The more you try to control how someone sees you, the less control you actually have, because you are reacting, adjusting, chasing their perception, instead of holding your own. Imagine this. Two people make the same decision. One explains it in detail, justifies it, clarifies every angle. The other simply states it, calmly, without urgency, without excess. Which one feels more certain? Which one feels more grounded? Which one feels harder to question? It is not about intelligence. It is not about logic. It is about presence. And presence is strongest when it is not trying to prove itself. That the deeper mechanism is even more revealing. When you explain yourself excessively, you are trying to control uncertainty. You are trying to eliminate the possibility of being misjudged. Because being misjudged feels like a loss of identity. But here is the truth you have been avoiding. Your identity is not in their perception. It is in your ability to remain stable, even when they misunderstand you. And this is where power begins. Not in being understood, but in not needing to be. Because once you need to be understood, you become dependent on the other person, their agreement, their validation, and that dependence is always felt, even if it is never spoken. And once it is felt, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer equal. You are negotiating. And the moment you start negotiating your identity, you lose authority over it. Everything changes the moment you see this clearly, not intellectually, but internally. You begin to notice the urge, that impulse to explain, to clarify, to correct, and instead of following it automatically, you pause, just for a moment, and in that moment you feel something uncomfortable. Silence, tension, uncertainty, the possibility that the other person might misunderstand you, and for the first time you do not fix it. You let it exist, and something unexpected happens. You do not collapse. You do not lose yourself. You remain. And that changes everything. Because now you are no longer reacting to perception, you are holding your position within it. And this is the shift most people never make. They think strength is in expression, in clarity, in being understood. But real strength is in containment, in knowing that you do not need to expose everything to be real. You do not need to explain everything to be valid. You do not need to justify everything to be right. And once you feel that, something inside you settles. You speak less, but when you do, it carries weight. You respond instead of reacting. You choose instead of chasing, and people notice, not because you told them to, but because your presence changed. You are no longer trying to convince. You are no longer trying to secure. You are simply there. And that is harder to ignore, harder to question, harder to diminish, because what people respect is not explanation, it is stability. And stability cannot be faked, it can only be felt. From this point forward, your world begins to look different. Not because people change immediately, but because you do. You start to see conversations not as places to prove yourself, but as spaces to observe. You notice how quickly people form opinions, how little they actually need explanation, how much they respond to tone, to presence, to restraint. And slowly, you stop trying to manage every perception. You allow some things to remain unsaid. You allow some misunderstandings to exist. Not because you are careless, but because you are no longer fragile. You understand that not every reaction needs correction. Not every question needs a full answer. Not every silence needs to be filled. And in that space, you gain something rare, self-containment, a quiet form of confidence that does not depend on approval. You still communicate, you still express, but you do it from choice, not from pressure, and that changes the energy completely. Because now your words are not trying to fix something. They are simply extensions of who you are. And people feel that, even if they cannot explain it, especially if they cannot explain it. There is a version of you that does not rush to be understood, that does not panic in silence, that does not feel the need to correct every perception. That version of you is not distant, not cold, not detached, just complete. Complete enough to let others think what they want, complete enough to remain steady without constant explanation. And when you become that version, something quiet but powerful happens. You stop chasing respect, and it starts finding you. Not because you demanded it, not because you explained yourself better, but because you no longer needed to. And that absence of need is what people recognize, even if they never say it, because in a world where everyone is trying to be understood, the one who is comfortable being misunderstood becomes impossible to ignore.